Isabella Cruz never expected miracles to happen in her life. At 19, she was used to waking up each morning in a cramped, run-down apartment in Brooklyn, where her grandmother, Elena, was the only person she had left to love. Orphaned at 5, Isabella was raised by Elena's tender hands full of love, but empty of resources. When Elena was diagnosed with cancer, the fragile world Isabella had built began to collapse. No health insurance, no savings, a minimum wage job at a sandwich shop on Myrtle Avenue. Isabella had no idea how to save the woman who had given up everything to raise her. She sent out dozens of resumes, none with impressive qualifications beyond a community secretary course and a few part-time jobs. But she didn't give up. Then, one cold March afternoon, an unexpected email arrived. A job interview invitation from a major corporation in Manhattan. She had no idea that walking into that skyscraper would be the first step into a destiny that would change her life forever. The Hayes Corporation Tower stood in the heart of Manhattan's financial district, a towering sculpture of glass and steel catching the cold light of a city that never sleeps. Isabella stood at the reception desk, clutching her thin resume, her nerves pulled taut. She expected little, just a standard office assistant job, a modest chance. The young woman, with neatly tied brown hair and a second-hand blazer, had no idea that today her interviewer would be Nathaniel Hayes himself, the company's CEO, once dubbed by Forbes as the man with a steel heart. When she stepped into the room on the 47th floor, sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, flooding the space with a sterile brilliance. A walnut desk dominated the center, and behind it, a tall man with silver-streaked hair stood, back turned, gazing out at the New York skyline. "Miss Cruz," he said without turning, "take a seat." Isabella sat down, setting her resume awkwardly on the desk. "I've read your file," Nathaniel said, finally turning to face her. "It's unimpressive. Yet here you are, in front of me. Do you know why?" Isabella swallowed hard. "Because I need this job more than anyone else," she said, voice trembling but eyes unwavering. He was silent for a beat. Then, instead of following the usual interview routine, he opened a drawer and pulled out a black folder. "This," he said, sliding it toward her, "is a different kind of offer." Isabella stared at him. "I don't understand." 3 months, he said. "You'll live at my home on the Upper East Side, serve as my personal assistant. I will train you, your mindset, skills, presence. I'll pay you 5 times the usual salary and cover your grandmother's medical treatment." "But why?" Isabella stammered. "There's nothing special about me." "That's exactly why I chose you," he replied. His cold gaze now held something unreadable. "I don't want someone pre-packaged. I want purity, truth, real hunger to live." Isabella stared at the folder like it was a snake about to strike. But then she pictured Grandma Elena, curled up in a hospital chair, frail fingers clutched around her worn-out Bible. Her hand reached, trembling, for the file. "You don't have to decide now," Nathaniel said, his tone softening. "Take it home, read carefully. If you agree, tomorrow at 8 a.m., you and a small suitcase will be standing in the front lobby." Then he added slowly, like a warning, "Some opportunities only come once in a lifetime. Choose wisely." That night, the tiny Brooklyn apartment was steeped in silence, broken only by the soft hiss of the radiator. Isabella sat at the kitchen table, the black folder before her like a blade on the chopping block. Each clause was cold and precise. Each word felt like a challenge to her heart. 3 months away from home, strict training schedule, complete confidentiality. She looked over at Grandma Elena, asleep in her armchair, the knitted shawl slipping from her shoulder, chest rising weakly. Isabella reached out, brushing a stray strand of silver hair from her face. A quiet sob escaped her lips. How could she leave her? But if she did nothing, would Grandma even be alive to wait for her? At sunrise, Isabella knocked on the door across the hall. Mrs. Martha, the retired neighbor, opened it, bleary-eyed. "Mrs. Martha, I need your help watching over my grandma for 3 months. I'll come back every weekend, I promise." The woman studied her face, then nodded silently. Isabella turned back toward the apartment, taking one last look. 3 months. One chance. One sacrifice. She had made her choice. Isabella arrived at exactly 8 a.m., carrying a small suitcase, a few modest outfits, and the signed contract tucked neatly into her purse. Her heart pounded as she stepped through the revolving doors of the Hayes building. Robert, a quiet, composed man in his 50s, was already waiting. Without saying much, he opened the door to a sleek black Mercedes and drove her to a place she had never dared to imagine, a penthouse on the top floor of a glass high-rise in the Upper East Side, where every window framed Central Park like a living painting. When they arrived, a neatly dressed woman in her early 50s stepped forward. "Ms. Cruz, I'm Clara, the house manager. Mr. Hayes is in a meeting, so I'll show you around." The apartment was vast. Walnut floors, high ceilings, abstract art on the walls, and natural light spilling in from every direction. Isabella walked as if entering a new realm, one of silence, precision, and elegance woven into every detail. Her room, or rather her private suite, faced east with a spacious bedroom, a marble-tiled bathroom with a soaking tub, and a small balcony overlooking the Hudson River. In the empty walk-in closet, a single handwritten note sat on the shelf. "Your wardrobe will be tailored. Nan H." Clara handed her a schedule. 7:00 a.m., breakfast. 8:00, 12:00, soft skills training, presentation, body language, wardrobe. 1:00, 3:00 p.m., cultural foundations, art, history, economics, social studies. 4:00 p.m. onward, shadow Mr. Hayes during work hours. She didn't understand everything, but she remembered every word. On the first day, Isabella learned how to walk without shrinking herself. Clara shadowed her, correcting the sway of her arms, her slouched shoulders, her clenched hands. "You walk like the world's about to end," Clara said. "We're going to teach you how to make the world listen." In the afternoon, Nathaniel met her for the first time in the reading room, soft light cascading across mahogany shelves. He watched silently as she read aloud from The Great Gatsby, correcting her pronunciation one word at a time. "You're hiding your Brooklyn accent like it's a flaw," he observed. "No," she whispered. "I hide it because I'm afraid of being judged." He nodded and stood. "I don't want you to hide it. I want you to own it." That night, alone in her room, Isabella stepped onto the balcony. The city was still awake. Cars flowed endlessly beneath her feet. Grandma Elena had called, her voice trembling with emotion upon hearing that for the first time, she had an appointment with a specialist. Isabella touched her chest, where her heart beat fast, not from fear, but from hope. And it was only the first day. The second week at the penthouse passed in a blur of relentless training. Isabella learned how to stand, sit, speak, breathe, as if her entire being needed to be reprogrammed. Clara was strict but patient. Nathaniel was something else entirely. He never yelled, but every correction was cold, every look dissecting all the flaws she tried so hard to hide. "Don't lower your head when speaking to an executive. Lose the it makes you sound uncertain." Again, from the top. That night, after a long session on personal introductions, Isabella stood quietly in the library, staring at Central Park, her heart a tangle of frustration. Nathaniel entered, holding a glass of wine. "You're upset," he said. "No need to ask." "I'm not some broken project," she snapped. "I know I'm not perfect, but every time you look at me, I feel like an ugly draft that needs fixing." Silence. Her words struck like a punch. "Do you know why I'm so harsh?" he said, approaching, his voice calm but firm. "Because I used to believe that if you followed every rule, every protocol, Success would follow. But I lost the most important woman in my life, despite doing everything right. Isabella looked up. For the first time, he wasn't cold. You're not a draft. But if you want to survive in this world, a world where even a misstep in a greeting can cost you, you need to learn not to let them define you. She swallowed hard, her anger softening. And you? Who defines you? Nathaniel turned to the window, Manhattan glittering beyond the glass. I let grief define me for far too long. Now, maybe, I'm learning again. The room fell quiet. Then we're the same, she said softly, both learning from scratch. Nathaniel turned to her, his eyes darker, quieter. Maybe so. For the first time, they were no longer teacher and student, nor boss and employee. They were simply two people with wounds of their own, standing on the edge between the past and something like hope. After that confrontation, neither of them spoke much more, but something shifted in the way they looked at each other during training. They began spending more time together, not out of obligation, but as if a rhythm had quietly formed. Isabella accompanied him to smaller meetings, learning to observe rather than intervene. Each time she offered a blunt insight, Nathaniel looked at her longer than usual. He didn't argue, he just nodded, silently. One afternoon, as she discreetly wiped ink from his hand after a contract signing, he smiled. A rare, genuine smile. You notice what others don't, he said. Because I used to be what people didn't notice, she replied. On quiet evenings, after long sessions, he brewed tea for both of them instead of pouring wine. They talked about music, about lost loved ones, about things no contract could cover. Isabella began to feel safe, not because of his wealth, but because of the quiet space he offered her, as if he knew she needed room to breathe. And Nathaniel, the man who once used distance to protect himself, found himself waiting for her voice each morning. Their connection didn't arrive like fire, it came like a small light, quietly lit day by day. One Friday afternoon, while Isabella was reviewing her speech draft for the charity gala, she was called into the office of Samantha Green, Nathaniel's longtime personal attorney. Samantha was sharp, composed, and carried the kind of gaze that always felt like she was calculating you. Hello, Isabella. I just wanted to confirm you fully understand the terms of your contract. Yes, I read everything carefully. Samantha gave a faint smile. You know, you're not the first, right? Isabella froze. What do you mean? Mr. Hayes has made similar arrangements in the past, with a few women. When the contracts ended, they were sent to study abroad or given secure jobs elsewhere. Always far away, Isabella steadied her voice. And after that, they didn't come back. The story always ended with the expiration of the contract. That night, Isabella found Nathaniel writing in the library. I just spoke with Samantha. He set his pen down and met her gaze, unflinching. She's right. So I'm just another project on your list? A pause. Maybe in the beginning, he said quietly. You were bright, had potential, needed help like the others. But then, he looked up, locking eyes with her. You challenged me. You frustrated me. You made me feel. Isabella waited still, breath held. I tried to keep this arrangement professional, Nathaniel said. But you're not just another chapter. You're the turning point. He stepped closer, eyes searching hers not for answers, but for courage. I never planned for this, Isabella. But when I look at you now, I don't see a contract. I see the life I thought I could never have again. Silence fell between them. Then, Isabella said slowly, no more contracts, no more clauses, no more rules. She stepped forward. Just choice, freedom, and honesty. Nathaniel nodded, slowly, like a man finally letting go of something he'd held too tightly for too long. The morning after that defining conversation, Nathaniel Hayes didn't call a meeting. He didn't send a formal email. He simply walked into the library where Isabella sat reading, holding the black leather folder, the contract that once tied them. "I don't want this to be what keeps you here," he said, setting it on the table. Without hesitation, he tore it in two. Isabella said nothing. She just looked at him and understood everything. A week later, on a windy evening atop the penthouse rooftop, he stood beside her. No flowers, no diamond ring, only the city lights as witness. "I don't know how long you'll stay, but if I could start again, I'd still want you to be the one who opens the next chapter of my life." Isabella didn't cry, but in her eyes, something tender and permanent bloomed. One afternoon, as golden light poured through the living room windows, Nathaniel turned to Isabella with a serious, gentle look. "I want Grandma Elena to live with us. This isn't just your home anymore, it's ours, all three of us." Isabella froze for a heartbeat. She had always thought she was stepping into his world, but here he was, opening the door to hers. When Grandma Elena arrived, her hair silver, her figure small, but her eyes still sharp with fire. Upon meeting Nathaniel for the first time, she didn't say much. She simply took his hand, hands once so unfamiliar with softness, and whispered, "Thank you for bringing color back into her world." Nathaniel's breath caught in his throat. No business deal, no boardroom applause had ever moved him this way. He tightened his hand around hers, not out of habit, but out of something he hadn't dared feel in years. "It's her who brought color back into mine," he finally said. It was the first time Nathaniel felt forgiven for the years he had lived numb. And Isabella stood there, watching them. One the root, the other the future, her heart finally quiet. A few months later, they held a wedding. No famous guests, no flashing cameras, just the rooftop garden bathed in candlelight, close friends, and Grandma Elena in the front row, eyes shimmering. Isabella wore a simple white dress, no jewelry, no elaborate flowers. Nathaniel wore a slate gray suit, his face calm, his eyes warm. When they exchanged vows, no one held back tears. And when Nathaniel leaned in to kiss her, slowly, gently, as if the world itself had paused, Isabella knew she was no longer part of someone else's story. She was writing the happiest chapter of her own. 2 years had passed since that rooftop wedding bathed in candlelight. Their life wasn't flashy, but it was full of quiet moments, shared glances, and a love that had been built day by day. One spring morning, Isabella stood barefoot in the wooden-tiled kitchen, holding a pregnancy test. When Nathaniel walked in, she didn't speak, just held it out, eyes shining brighter than any words. He looked at it, then fell silent. And then, those strong, steady hands trembled. "You're going to be a father," she whispered. Nathaniel sat down, buried his face in his hands, and for the first time in years, he cried. Not from pain, but from a joy too big to hold in. At 51, he had owned everything: success, respect, power. But only now did he understand what it truly meant to be alive. And Grandma Elena heard the news. She held Isabella tight, her eyes glistening. "A part of you healed the day you met him," she said. "This child. She'll complete the rest." Months later, on a golden autumn afternoon, Isabella gave birth to a healthy baby girl. They named her Helena Cruz Hayes. Helena, to honor Nathaniel's late wife, who once taught him how to love with his whole heart. Cruz, Isabella's mother's name, a quiet tribute to all the women who bore the weight of the world with strength and grace. Baby Helena was more than a child. She was a living testament to real transformation, not born of contracts or status, but of trust, surrender, and unconditional love. Nathaniel gazed at his daughter in Isabella's arms, then turned to Grandma Elena sitting beside the bed, her silver hair a crown of wisdom. "She is our true legacy," he whispered. Isabella smiled, placing her hand over his heart. "Not yours, not mine, but born from a love brave enough to break all boundaries." Outside the window, winter began to creep in, but inside that room, where 3 generations sat wrapped in light, there was only warmth. Baby Helena stirred, tiny fingers curling around Isabella's thumb. Nathaniel placed a kiss on her forehead, and Grandma Elena closed her eyes in peace. 3 hands rested together, young, grown, and wise. In that moment, they weren't just a family, they were home.